What's up, guys? Don't you just hate it when you make catastrophic mistake in poker, where you think your play is so bad and maybe out of character that you begin to question yourself, your self-image, your worth as a poker player, your mindset becomes blurry, you feel insecure, threatened, fight or flight mentality starts to consume you. When you try to analyze the hand, you might realize that you're not actually truth-seeking, you're not really being curious about the objective truth of the hand, but you're more trying to reassure yourself or soothe yourself. You might ask for comfort from friends or poker peers and say, was this too tight? Is this okay? Here's why I did this. Please tell me it's all right. But when we do that, we make it all about us, and it's no longer about the hand. And that's a problem because we lose objectivity. So let's work today on how we can best handle mistakes. I'm going to show you two hands from yesterday morning's stream where I think I went wrong. I think the first hand in particular in a 4-bet pot was a situation where I made a fairly significant mistake. I'm going to try and process this in the best way. We're going to explore it together using poker solvers. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll feel a bit more equipped to deal with it on those inevitable occasions where you make mistakes. None of us are infallible. We all make mistakes on a daily basis at the poker table. It's how we handle them and how we grow from them that makes the biggest difference to our long-term prospects in this game. Let's get to the video. So this hand here is a spot that really confused me. I'm going to play you the clip in just a second. Pay attention to how I act in-game here, because it's going to provide some insights into why I made the mistake that I think I made in this hand. Once we're done watching the clip, we're going to go over this in PokerStars. I've got the sim all ready to go. I'm going to see what we can learn from this together. Going to be mixing with 4-bet and call here. 9-8-7 is obviously horrific for range. Checking everything on this board is okay. We are not running very well in big pots right now, guys. But when this happens to you at the start of your session, you just keep going. It's okay. Really weird run out here. Very bad spot for our range, this board in general. Oh my god, what is going on here? I don't know, but we have some showdown value now. We're just checking. Okay. I don't think we're turning that into a bluff. Are we? Maybe we are? So the first thing you probably noticed there is that I didn't really have any time at all for this spot. And spots of this kind of complexity, where the board is ridiculously messy, like it's absurdly wet. We refer to these as tsunami boards in Carrot Poker School Grade 1. Boards that are so wet that they basically just fuck everything up and change the status quo with respect to relative hand strength and where your hand is in your range and what its function is. And this King 10 here, my first theory on the river, as I started to realize in game, you can probably see there that if I had an extra 10 seconds on my time bank and was using it well, you have to actually use it well. It's no good having 10 extra seconds if you're just going to spend it agonizing and suffering. Then I may have come to the conclusion that this hand is quite near the bottom of my range. I think I could also have something like Ace-5 suited here maybe, but apart from that, I have very few combinations of one pair and worse. So even though we've rivered top pair here, this hand is still losing to significant regions of villain's range. And although it has a bit of showdown value, it could well be that the EV of betting is better than the EV of checking, even though checking is positive. And this is very often the case when the situation runs out well for us. So the solver may well tell me that I should have bluffed this hand on the river. I don't know what it's going to say. I've not looked at the solver verdict yet at all. So I don't know if it's going to tell me off here. Let's find out. Let's load up the sim. So let's go through this sim together. The first thing that we should really note when we load up any sim, and we're looking at a flop strategy, is that we understand what we refer to as favorability in the Carrot Poker School. Favorability is how good the world we're in is for our range compared to our opponent's range. So if we click this button here, EV out of position in PokerStars, it's going to tell us that our range is entitled to a measly 145.24 chips. This is a 5-10 game, and so the pot in this 4-bet pot is 415 chips. So we're entitled to way less of the pot than our opponent is. If we look at the in-position player here, they're entitled to 269, 270 chips, something like that in game theory. This means that because frequency is controlled by range advantage, and we have a big range disadvantage, we usually start by checking. That's not to say that every hand has to check. You can build a betting range here. One very nice simplification here is just to check your whole range in spots like this, that's not really going to lead to any real EV loss in reality or even in theory. And so I began here with a range check strategy, expecting my opponent to open the action pretty frequently against the check here. They're meant to use small bets pretty frequently, unsurprisingly, because their range is doing well. The pocket aces the villain had is actually a pure bet, so they did well to find that. So aces bets here. Our decision with king 10 isn't really much of a decision. We just don't have a strong enough draw to go all in here. Any raise is going to be completely pot committal. I don't think our hand is good enough to go all in, so we just decide to call clearly against quarter pot. We're not going anywhere. We have way too much equity. We have some implied odds, but not much. Going to just go ahead and peel here. So the turn came down, the 5 of spades, just making the board even messier still. I don't think sixes or anything is like a big part of anyone's range in this node, but still, the 3rd spade here makes our hand even worse than it was before. We check, and thankfully our opponent does check back this time. So villain actually errs a little bit here. Aces is actually meant to bet again for small sizing here. In spots where the board gets insanely messy, where like tons of good made hands are possible, and there's quite a lot of polarization in our range here, because we might have a hand that's just like one pair, like kings, no spade, or we might have a flush, or aces with ace of spades. We have quite a lot of polarization. We have some hands in our range that are far, far better than others. And when that's the case, usually villain just wants to use a strategy of small betting into that more polarized, nutty range. So villain's going to go for small bet here really often with aces, and this is still functioning as a value bet at this point, just because our range just really doesn't contain many combos with the 6 in them and doesn't have a lot of spade. You'll note that when aces has the ace of spades, it's just a pure value bet. It's like a mandatory bet for value in this case. You can always click on EV though and see how big a deal that is. And you can see that when they have a spade, they're losing a reasonable amount of chips, like 6 or 7 chips by not betting. That's less than a big blind though in a big pot, so it's probably not a huge deal here that our opponent decided to check. I don't think it's like a big mistake or anything that they need to worry about. It's not obvious that they should be betting there with aces by any means to a human. The solver does find some bets that are quite counterintuitive sometimes. So the 10 of spades comes on the river, and sure enough, our hand is really low down in our range. Yes, it does have a lot of check EV, so this hand is entitled to 110 chips by checking. That's about a sixth of the pot. It's about like 18-19% of the pot, something like that. When your hand is entitled to that many chips by checking, it feels really counterintuitive and wrong to bet. Here's the thing. You're not comparing the EV of betting to 0, because 0 would be folding. You're comparing the EV of betting to the EV of checking. And because this is a decent spot for our range, we're going to generate a lot of fold equity here by betting. The solver thinks we can either go small, in which case we generate 41% fold equity. That's a ton. Villain's MDF here is like 75% against a small bet. So they're grossly overfolding here in GTO, and that's because their range disadvantage just can't stomach defending at that MDF frequency. It's a fallacy that you always have to make your opponent indifferent to bluffing. You probably want to do as much as you can, but sometimes your range just shackles you to folding at a high frequency. If we go all in, you'll see the fold equity is even more. It's like 64%. This is absolutely huge, and you can see why hands that have some showdown value, like ace-5 are bluffing, like king-10 are bluffing. We are just supposed to turn these hands into a bluff pretty frequently, but it is close. I at least take a little bit of solace in the fact that it wasn't a huge blunder. But what wasn't so great here was that in my 3 seconds of like rivering this card and having to make a decision, I didn't have the thought that I'm at the bottom of my range. If I'd had that thought, I would have bluffed. And here's the other kicker to this spot. Not the kicker that goes with the pair, but the sort of bonus factor. I wonder if people are overfolding here. This looks like a spot that nobody is bluffing in. This looks like a spot that's really underbluffed, we could say. So if I do go all in here, for instance, let's just investigate the opponent's reaction. By the way, if you use a solver in a way where you just look at the strategy and go, oh, that's the answer, you may as well throw your solver in the garbage, man. You may as well just get rid of it, like set it on fire, because that's a disgrace. That's not how you use a solver. We talked about this in episode 1 of season 2 of Poker Distilled, our podcast that came out, I think last week, something like that. By the time you're watching this, maybe 2 weeks ago. You have to use solvers intelligently. They're so powerful. You can play about with them. You can look at reactions. You can look at EV. You can look at what happens next if you do X compared to if you do Y. You can do so many things with it. If you're just like, oh, the solver says I should blah, 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 just put it in the bin. Like, probably put your computer in the bin. Just bin your computer. Get a Game Boy and just play Mario on that Donkey Kong. Anyway, back to this hand. So, villain is folding a ton here. Is he overfolding? Do I ever expect queens to look me up here? Nah, not really. Do I expect aces to look me up here? No, not really. I don't think so. very, very infrequently. Maybe aces with ace of spades get suspicious sometimes and like bluff catches against the all-in because they block the immortal nuts, and that's what I'm repping. So maybe that hand does call, and that hand probably gets you way more often than it does here. So that's actually bad for bluffing. Does ace king with the ace of spades get here? Yeah, probably. Maybe even more than this. What about jacks? Do people fold jacks here if I go all in? Ostensibly, yes, because it's like a bluff catcher with not very good blockers, because jacks with a spade is meant to have bet earlier. So overall, this is kind of unclear to me. I would guess that this is... I don't think people have these nutted hands as much. They're definitely very guilty of betting them on the turn too much, even though like ace queen of spades is just pure check. Low SPR, invincible hand. I'm going to guess this is a bit overfolded, and I'm going to say that my play is a bigger mistake in reality than it is in GTO. I don't think it's a huge blunder, like I thought it was maybe going to be, but it's definitely the case that in my 3 seconds here, I need to give myself a bit of leeway because 3 seconds is not a lot of time. Maybe the lesson here is have a bigger time bank. But what I should have really thought about in this hand is that when you're at the bottom of your range, and your range is doing well, and 4 flush is necessarily good for the 4-better. The 4-better has all these combos of like ace king off with a spade, that the 3-better doesn't. Aces, kings, queens at a higher frequency with a spade than the 3-better because they shove their kings pre-flop. They're meant to slow play aces, okay, but not kings. So we're just doing better here. Our range is amazing. We've filtered on the flop. They still have ace king of clubs and stuff like that. Ace queen of hearts. We don't have any of that shit because we just don't really get to call flop with it. So we are the ones in the driver's seat with the range advantage here. We have the bottom of our range. We should at least be considering bluffing the bottom of our range in a range advantage spot. We went straight to showdown value here. We thought it was too much to bluff, but we didn't consider the overall picture enough. Next time I have a spot with 3 seconds to act like this, hopefully I'll realize that. I'm usually really good at seeing when I'm at the bottom of my range and realizing I've got to find those bluffs. I think I do it better than most people, but here I just didn't quite get to it. I would like to say if I had 10 more seconds, I'd have figured this one out. I don't know that I would though. It depends what kind of frame of mind I'm in. I've got to be really focused to find this. All right. Let's move on to the second spot that I think I might have butchered. This one, I really feel like I got a bit off the rails and lost sight of like the theory a bit too much as I was making my decision on the river. So let's take a look at it. Fives, let's go ahead and call here. So fives is definitely just going to be a call here against this sizing, especially with the spade. On queen 8-4 in these positions, this changes when you get earlier here, but this is just going to be a call. Think turn is going to be sizing dependent. I'd expect to see B75 more than overbet here on a 6, but overbet's not like out the question or anything for villain. So 5 still has, I mean, it's pretty low down now actually. Like we have a 4, we don't have a lot of worse hands than this. We have like a bit of ace high. This is super close actually, but I'm going to go ahead and bluff here. And the reason I'm going to bluff is I don't think people do a good enough job of checking hands like 10-9. Stuff like that that hits the nuts on this river. We also have the 5 of spades, which helps block things like ace 5 of spades, king 5 of spades, etc. And villain rivers 2 pair. That spot, the result was obviously bad. And I'll just quickly mention something that I've mentioned before, which is a mental game trap that students of mine often fall into. I have to teach them to sort of recognize and step back from. It's called Ouch, I Should Never Have. We went over this when we looked into my book, Poker Therapy. A few weeks ago, we picked a few of the fixes, the mental game fixes in that book. And one of them was this idea that like at the point where this river overbet gets called, we feel like shit. We're like, God damn it. If I hadn't done that, that wouldn't have happened. This regret kind of loop logic going on there. You know, like Y was caused by X, therefore X was bad because Y was bad. Like that kind of thing. And you know, fair enough, man. That's true that X caused Y, but X doesn't always cause Y. X has a myriad of different results. So when we bluff the river here, of course we can just get it through. Really often we can just run into like 7s or 9s or 10s or 8-7 or 6-7 or queen deuce or jack 9 or something that doesn't want a bluff catch. So my supposition in game here was that this river overbet was going to be overfolded to. I thought it was close between betting and checking in GTO. So similar spot to the last one, but basically here I was aware that my hand did have quite a bit of showdown value. The jack diminishes it a bit, but the jack is okay for my range because I've called flop. I've said I have something to do with the queen 8-4 board. I've said I've not missed this board entirely. I don't have ace 5 of diamonds when I call that flop c-bet. Villain can still have that hand. So I move towards stuff that kind of likes the jack some of the time. So it's not a bad river for me. A bad river for me would be like the ace of diamonds or something. Like a card that just like absolutely just misses my range and hits my opponent's flop, bet, turn, check hands. So it's not a bad river for me. Therefore, if I check, my opponent's not meant to just bluff absolutely every worse hand in fives. Like, they're going to have to just give up a lot with ace-king and stuff like that, and we are going to win. So definitely checking has a lot of pot share here. I don't know how much. We'll find out when we look at the sim. Again, I've not seen the sim. I don't know what it's going to say, so we're going to learn together. But here's the deal. Is the fold equity we get in reality, as I said in game, is it more than it should be? Because if it is, we can maybe justify this. And the other thing is, I think I've got more showdown value than I thought here. I actually think check might be higher EV than I thought here, and that's why I think this might be a mistake. So let me be clear, I don't think this is the mistake because villain had this hand and because I lost, and I'm not doing that. Had I won, I think I would be equally concerned with this play. I think I've maybe just underestimated the amount of the time I actually just win at showdown here. Let's have a look at the sim now. So the flop is queen 8-4 and villain goes for this half pot sizing. As you can see with fives, we are mostly going to be folding here when we don't have the spade. When we do have the spade, we have a pure call. That's going to swing things a little bit. The main reason this swings things, well, there's two main reasons this swings things. The first one is that our set draw is a hell of a lot better when the 5 that comes is not a spade, and when we have the 5 of spades, it can't be. So whenever we make a set, when we have the 5 of spades, that can never be on a flush making turn or river. Okay, the turn can come a 5 and then the river can come a spade, but you get the picture. And the other reason is that it blocks villain from having their most likely double barrels, and we're probably going to be folding the turn on most cards to double barrel. That's just the way it goes. You can call flop the full turn, that's not a problem. And because of that, it's good to block hands like Jack 5 of spades, Ace 5 of spades, King 5 of spades, which are going to bet and we're going to fold to. It's not always a good thing to unblock your opponent's bluffs when they're high equity bluffs that you have to fold to with your hand anyway, because you're playing against their range and not their hand. That's a blocker phenomenon that a lot of people get wrong. They're like, oh, it's bad to have the spade because I'm blocking the bluffs. They're barely bluffs. They have like 50% equity and they're going to bet the turn and just muscle you out of the pot really frequently. So the 5 of spades is good. We call the flop because of it, because it's a deal-breaking factor. It's close enough against half pot. You know, if this was third pot, we would call any pocket fives combo, any whatsoever. The turn is the 6 of hearts, and it goes check, check. The river is the jack of spades, and we land on this node with a pretty significant amount of pot share EV, 68 chips out of 111 chips, so big range advantage spot for us. That means, of course, that we are in a river blunder theorem spot, that when we get here with ace 9, we have to bluff, ace 10, we have to bluff. Bottom of range has to bluff. Deuces has to bluff. Threes should probably bluff. Fives is the first pocket pair that doesn't, according to the sim. So this isn't too bad. We're not too far off here as far as our awareness of thresholds went. I thought this was close. Maybe I thought it was one pocket pair further down, but I'm going to give myself some kudos for that. I think that's a good job well done. When we look at EV though, what we see is that it is about 4 chips better to check than it is to bet. So this is getting into blunder territory, like losing half a big blind in a pot that's only like 8 big blinds or something. It's even less. It's probably like 7, 8 big blinds. That's a big problem. So losing half a big blind here in EV is not a good thing. So theoretically, this is like large mistake. Maybe not quite blunder, but large mistake, significant mistake. Now, can we back the play exploitatively? We were wrong about the baseline. We thought this hand was literally going to be indifferent between bet and check when we're in game here, in theory, and it's not. But can we claw back a bit of, I don't know. I don't want to say solace, because I don't really want to like make this about me. I'm trying to not do that, right? So my brain here is going, if we can exploitatively justify this bet, then we can feel better about ourselves. And that's wrong. That's turning the focus inward on the self. What we actually want to do here, as we discussed in the introduction, is to turn the focus outward onto the hand and replace insecurity with curiosity. Because if we can do that, we can get inspired and we can get into that place we need to be, that mental space we need to be in to be able to truly learn from this experience of looking at the sim, instead of just going, oh yeah, it says check. Oh yeah, I'm shit. Again, if you just look at this and go, oh yeah, it's a check, that was a mistake, like, that's really bad. Again, throw your computer in the bin. What we really need to be looking into now is whether the overbet here, which the solver thinks is probably the highest EV size that we could use, if we bet, it likes the overbet sizing as far as betting goes, but doesn't think we should bet. That's its line on the situation here. But is this overfolded? Like, this is the case. Like, how is villain meant to react? Okay, so Queen Jack, the hand they had, is meant to call. That's pretty normal. What else is meant to call? So Jack 10, Jack 9, these hands are meant to mix. Jack 8, that's 2 pair. That's meant to fold sometimes against overbet. I don't think that's happening. 10-8's always meant to fold. I think these will usually fold. 6x is meant to fold. I don't think they're going to have as many low flushes here, which is a good thing. I don't think they're going to find calls with like 6-5, these hands that unblock our bluffing range either, which is a really good thing. I can't believe what winning call 6-5 of clubs is there, or 6-5 of diamonds is. It's almost like a full big blind winning. That's quite a lot for a bluff catcher. Ace-6, I don't think they're likely to find that. I think they're just going to fold a lot more of these low hands and call a bit more with like the 2-pair. Overall, I would say I'm still kind of optimistic about the fold equity here, scanning through these hands against overbet. It's a pretty scary node. We don't have a lot of obvious bluffs. I think this is probably a bit better than it is in theory. That would be my estimate here. This is not an exact science, you know. Sometimes people are like, well, I mean, if you node lock, you can find out the EV of your play. Shut up, nerds. Node locking sucks. Everybody who likes solvers, anybody who's good at solvers, I should say, knows that node locking is something you should do very sparingly. That it is kind of a mugs game because you have to guess at the input. So I could sit there and go into node locking and remove lots of combos from villain's range and say these ones call, these ones folds, this is what people really do, and I could find the EV of the play. But like, if I'm wrong about my estimate there, what's the point in going into that level of detail? I could easily just still be wrong, and I can just estimate, like, without doing that, whether the play goes up or down in EV and roughly by how much. So I can just be like, well, you know, the very small amount of chips, the half of a big blind I'm losing here can be, I know that's nothing. I know that can be eradicated really easily. So if I do look at this and think there's a significant amount of overfolding going on here, I can be very confident the play is plus EV. I don't need to node lock to see that. And I'm not going to be any surer about my estimates of villain strategy by node locking than I am by just estimating, because that part has to be input manually. So I really think node locking is kind of stupid and overdone, and I do use it sometimes. There's a time and a place for it, don't get me wrong. Like, you could take that quote out of context and then say, well, Pete, you used node locking and cash injection. But that was just to demonstrate in episode 1 of cash injection, if you've seen that, that was to demonstrate just how much things can swing based on villain folding a few extra combos to a check raise on the flop after they bet their range. In any case, I think this hand was okay, but a bit more of a deviation than I thought it was at the time. Just need to work on my understanding of showdown value in this spot and how much air villain still has. I think the overbet's all right here. Let's finalize this by summarizing a few key points though. When you are analyzing hands in which you think you may have made a mistake, a few points. 1, leave a bit of time between the hand happening and your analysis, just to make sure that you're no longer so charged and like insecure or emotional about it. You don't want to be looking at a mistake when it's all about you. The point of analyzing poker hands is to understand them, not to make you feel a certain way. So when you've become the subject here of the process, when you're like the patient and you're trying to cure yourself by analyzing a hand, you're using the hand as a means to an end instead of as an end in itself. A hand of poker is an end in itself. If you can understand that hand of poker, you have mastered an element of poker. That's the end. You shouldn't be using it as a means to your own emotional ends. Secondly, let yourself off the hook. Like, people make mistakes all the time. You should make mistakes. Like, if you don't, you're like a bizarre alien. I don't know what you even are, like some kind of superhuman creature. So you're going to make mistakes. Try to forgive yourself. Try to see them as opportunities to grow, and do everything you can to make sure that the relationship you have with your own mistakes is one of drive, motivation, and curiosity, and not one of insecurity, fragile ego, defensiveness, asking for help, seeking validation. All of these things are horrible traps to fall into. Very easy to, as a human, it's very easy to fall into the trap of seeking validation when you're feeling insecure, but they're really traps you want to avoid. And then finally, I would say when you do your analysis, make sure you start with a theoretical assessment. So go into a solver and say, well, how was this play? How well did I do here? If you don't have a solver, do some theory, like get the Carrot Poker School, do a theory course, learn where the baselines are, where the thresholds are in game theory, and then react from there. And then try to compare the next node, try to look at the EVs, try to understand what's going on, see the bigger picture. Don't just look at what the hand is doing and just be like, oh, it says fold, so I made a mistake, done. That would be really bad. Hope this video has helped. Some good news on our end is that Grady is scheduled to come out around, I think, the start of September now, maybe end of August if we're lucky, but sometime around then. That's our mass data course. I hope that you'll check it out in Carrot Corner. And even more excitingly, all the Carrot Corner content that's coming out, that's been out in the past, the courses, everything that's coming in the future, you'll be able to watch it directly on carrotcorner.com. No need to download any more pesky videos. We're going to have a video library ready to go very soon as well. Do smash the like button if you like the content. Do check out carrotcorner.com. I'll see you on the next video for some more educational poker stuff on this channel. Bye for now, guys.